Welcome to Marketing Insights for MSPs. Today our topic is likes to leads as we dive into the exciting topic of social media. I'm your host, Angus Robertson, and CMO at ConnectWise. Co-host here, Maddie.
I'm Maddie Matheny. I'm Director of Revenue Marketing, and today we're super excited because we are joined by a guest. She is our social media guru and here to help us with all things and to help drive this conversation. But Jess, I'd love it if you would introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Kane. I manage our social media at ConnectWise. I also oversee our digital communities, so focusing on educating and connecting with our partners and really building a strong community.
I love it. Okay, well, we have an exciting agenda today. So we're going to go through a couple of things, but we wanted to talk about a couple of the areas where we feel like you can invest in social media and just can really work through that. So I want to start by handing it over to Jess to talk a little bit about the power of personal brand and branding just in general.
Yeah, so that is obviously the overarching goal of social media, brand awareness. And so we're always trying to build awareness for our company brands and, the logos. And a lot of people forget that social media is social. So what you need to be doing is engaging. And so we also know as human beings that companies are run by other human beings, in addition to AI these days, of course. But we want to get to know the people that are working at the companies because that is what will drive that connection and make us interested in continuing to build those relationships. So building your own personal brand, I suggest starting on LinkedIn because that is the optimal place to start building your professional image. But once you build up your brand there, then you can start pushing people to the company brand because you've already built up that audience.
Yeah, and I can share a story just to reinforce what Jess said about personal brand. Before coming to ConnectWise, I was a consultant, a fractional CMO for 3 years. And if you didn't build your business, or if you didn't have clients, you didn't get paid as a consultant or fractional CMO. And so from a biz dev standpoint, everybody's very familiar with email and calls, but social media is a key part of that. And so the first year was there, the firm provided all the biz dev and sources, so I didn't get paid as much because I was just doing the delivery. But with getting into the second year, I was able to source all that business myself, all my business myself, and also bring in some business for some of the other fractional CMOs. And LinkedIn was a big part of that. And one of the things I focused on and learned from a lot of other folks who are really best in class is expanding the network. So when I started there, I had 2,000 connections, and they weren't really my target audience. When I left, I had close to 6,000 connections, and there were much more the folks I wanted to deal with. So SMB CEOs, that sort of thing. And as I did the outreach, I learned the kind of messages to engage properly, but I would get a 20 to 30% connection rate. And on LinkedIn, you can do, I think, at least 100 connections a month. Sometimes they'll give you a little bit more than that. And then I focused on the top of funnel stuff. I know this is an area that Maddie feels passionately about with content, but what's the thought leadership? So sharing best practices, insights that would engage that target audience. And LinkedIn Lives were a big part of that, and bringing on guests or influencers that my target audience resonated with. And then thirdly, I use LinkedIn Sales Navigator to target specific folks I wanted to engage with. So the right titles, the right locations, the right kind of industries. And then were they active or not on LinkedIn? And was there an interesting change? Like they just lost some people, or they just had a nice funding round, or they're growing. And there I would do the hard sell. And I actually got a fair amount of pipeline and business through that. So extending the reach, building out that thought leadership type capability, and then having those connections. And one of the other things that helps too, I know Jess is passionate about, are the folks you're trying to reach like and comment on their posts, right? Because then they start to see you and get to know you. But Maddie, I know you feel passionately about content. What are some of your thoughts there on how to build engaging content at the top of funnel?
For sure. I think it's so interesting when people are getting started with LinkedIn or just social media in general, the first tendency can be like, let me pitch my services and get those out there. And that is not
We
necessarily
don't
what
see
we
that
want to.
often, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly. Really, what we try to recommend going with, and what I typically see work best for a lot of MSPs, is go with, and Jess and I were talking about this yesterday, but really go with the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule is trying to focus the majority of your content, that 80%, on anything that is thought leadership, engaging. It could even be things like World Backup Day or something like that is coming up. Like, let's make sure that we have a post about that, and your customers are thinking about that and following you on social media and that kind of thing. So trying to really plug into current events if you can, if there's anything going on in the market that you can capitalize on and share even just some of your thoughts. It doesn't have to be crazy from a content perspective, and social media. Jess and I were talking about this yesterday too. Just the human side of social media is so important. So being able to just write a quick post, or post your thoughts in video format if you want to do that and you're feeling brave, can be really key, I think. So really trying to make sure that most of that content is that 80% in that engagement side of things. And then you can still talk about your services too, like Angus was saying, but try to keep that to like the 20% range. So making sure that we're really focusing that 80% on what we know people are going to care about and their pain points, and really make it about them, and then make the 20% about us.
Yeah,
And I know,
I live and breathe by that rule too. I think being helpful, being relatable, making sure people forget about this last one. So I say that 80% should be educate, entertain, and inspire. And people forget about that entertaining one, because part of what we're all doing, even if it's, professional-ish and we're on LinkedIn, we're still sort of looking for an escape. And if we're not looking for an escape, we're looking for connection or education. And we don't all want to be sold to all the time. That is for sure. One of my favorite examples, so now we're kind of coming full circle from the personal branding to content and such. Alan Comment, and I hope he's watching because he'll love that he gets this shout out. But he's been doing a lot of sharing on LinkedIn, and there's quite a variety. So some things are really focused on tech and AI and what the industry looks like. But then there's some content that's just fun or exciting, or talks about how he utilizes best practices in his role and his vision for connecting with partners on a human level. And it's made a big impact for Alan and for his audience, but then it comes and makes a big impact on the brand as well. We featured Alan on one of our live streams a couple of weeks ago, and we had almost 4 times the number of average viewers that we're getting on our live streams, because he's built the audience. So now people come to expect that he has something valuable to say. Plus he's funny, so they want to listen to him. So it all started with building that personal brand, and now it's starting to pay off for the bigger brand as well.
I love it.
Yeah. No, I was just say, I mean, we love, supporting Alan and his relatively small ego, but it's a really good point, Jess. I think that you highlighted the fact that there was more than 5,000 folks who watched that, and typically we see over 1,000 or so. So that absolutely had a big difference. And you've helped ConnectWise significantly the past couple of years. When you started just a couple of years ago, we had something like 60,000 followers. Now we have more than 165,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is phenomenal. I know you think about Reddit, you think about some of the other social media sites and Facebook, and how to engage and track sentiment there. But how do you think about strategy as it relates to an MSP or any business that's trying to build their social presence? What are some of the components that go into that?
Yeah, so you did a great job leading into that, because I think one of the most important things is the focus on other platforms as well. So we talk a lot about LinkedIn. Obviously, we're a B2B company. Most of our partners are B2B companies as well. So we know that our partners and their clients and customers are on LinkedIn, but also a lot of small and medium businesses are on Facebook or they're on Twitter. So the first and probably most important part of your strategy, and I cannot emphasize enough that you need to have a strategy, because if random tactics lead to random results, and then you can't really track anything, and you're not sure what your next step is. So you do need a strategy, at least, define some goals, but you need to understand your audience. Where are they? who are they engaging with, what's interesting to them. I know for an MSP that can be hard because a lot of your customers are sort of all over the board. So you might need to be in multiple places. So I do suggest too that you have specific strategy or goals or guidelines for each platform and how you're going to address people. So LinkedIn, you could do a lot more thought leadership, professional connection, whereas on Facebook or Instagram, you can share those fun company moments or memes or really embrace the entertainment piece. The goal is just to get your name and your brand out there, and you need to do the research to figure out where to best start.
Cool. Well, Maddie, as you look at the overall go-to-market and demand gen, how do you weave social media into how you execute and what your strategy is?
Social media is so important. I love all of the channels, of course. So what I think is the biggest thing is how do you get all of the channels to work together to get to the result that you are looking for? And so really when we're looking at channels in social media, I look at social as really a top of funnel channel or a demand creation channel, we call it. Demand creation is just how do we not only make ourselves aware to someone, but also help them identify that they have some kind of pain and would be interested, at least essentially in partnering with us, hopefully in the future. But that's where social media can really help with that. So I think doing things like live streams, helping push around pain points, those type of messages that really are going back to what Jess said about just educating, engaging, and making it exciting. That is really key. And then really what our goal is from there is how do we get someone to the website? Like, could we get them to some kind of page? Eventually, is there like some kind of CTA that we could pop in and try to push them to that? And I'm not saying we're pushing to like a bottom of funnel, do a demo now, no, or like do a request for services, but it's like, hey, here's some additional content that we can get you to that will help you not just continue to have that conversation, but hopefully eventually get you to that next step as well. And then you work on retargeting throughout and that kind of thing. So social's huge to really kickstart, I would say, the demand gen journey.
Yeah, and if there's any folks who have questions or any things you're thinking about in the audience about social media, any challenges you have, any ideas that you have, feel free to ask those questions in the comments. We're tracking those, so we'll ask our experts here and get Jess's thoughts on that. Just as Maddie was talking, it made me think of one of the things that you've been pushing and championing for, which is our employee advocacy and our executive advocacy. How do you think about that, and what's the impact there, and does it help website traffic, and does it increase our reach?
I think it does all of the above. I think maybe the most important thing to consider about, I'm listing all of things as the most important because they're all important. I guess I'm not prioritizing well, but it is really important that you remember that social is a long game too. You don't build an audience overnight. You may not direct a ton of traffic to your website with one social post. The idea is that you're starting to spark those thoughts in people's minds so that when they do come looking for a solution, your brand is top of mind. One way that we make sure we're getting that message across is by leveraging our colleagues and our leadership. So we have a really awesome platform powered by Sprinkler that allows us to have a content repository that our colleagues can really quickly and easily share out. Huge for brand awareness. We're getting double, if not more, the reach from our colleagues sharing content as we are from our own personal brand. But you don't really need a big, robust platform, especially at a smaller company, to leverage your colleagues. So I would just encourage all of your colleagues to share out interesting things they're doing, trade shows they're attending. It is okay to share a demo once in a while and be really excited about your product and what you offer. That should not be the primary focus of your social presence, but you can push that out and say, listen, I'm really excited about this. I would love for you to join me. Just start building the audience around all of the people at your company, because again, that is what actually drives the success of the company, is the people behind it. So it ties back to building that personal brand. When your colleagues are engaged, they're building their own personal brand. So it pays off for them in the end, but it also drives significant awareness of the company as well. So highly encourage everyone at all the companies to start promoting their brand.
Yeah, and I don't know if folks caught that, but just said double, right? And we have 165,000 followers on our corporate page. So quite a lot of reach there. So with the employees engaging and being part of the message and believing the message and wanting to share that message, we get double the reach. And I know, Jess, that we're just getting started there, so there's more potential on the employee and executive advocacy. But I think that's pretty interesting that employees can have more than, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but more than double the impact that the company accounts do. So don't make sure to take advantage of your employees or include them in your strategy. I was looking at one of our employees internationally, and I saw he had more than 20,000 followers. Like, whoa! So there's some real diamonds in our employee organization who just really know how to navigate social media. And something else you highlighted, Jess, I thought was really important is just and Maddie talked about this as well, in the different channels and where your prospects are in their buyer journey. At any one point, it's single digit percentage points of your target market are actively looking for a new solution. It could be just a few percent. So, more than 90% aren't actively looking, but the more they can understand your brand or be aware of your brand, relate to your brand, connect to your brand, over time, when they do need a little bit more help or they do want to engage from a further down the funnel standpoint and actually evaluate and potentially purchase your solutions, they already have you in mind. And that's one of the hardest things for us to justify as marketing teams. Is it's easy to show the bottom of funnel activity. It's like, I put this money into paid search, I got these leads, they converted into these deals. But I remember at ConnectWise, when I was supporting as a contractor, we were going through this with a previous salesperson who's like sales leader who just said, spend more money on paid search because those turn into leads that turn into deals. But as that happened, we saw our funnel dry up significantly because we weren't nurturing people and making sure we had awareness and engagement at the top of funnel, such that when they were ready, we had those pipeline and leads to support our business.
I love that.
Remember that, Maddie?
Yes, I do. That was a fun time.
Yeah.
Speaking of just being able to kind of measure things, and obviously we have the bottom of funnel, but the top of funnel, I think the metrics for social media have to be really different. So while we're not necessarily looking for that inbound request to speak necessarily, Jess, what are some of the things that MSPs can be tracking from a more top of funnel perspective that can show that there's an impact being made in this channel?
Yeah, so it goes back to, once you have your strategy defined and your goals defined, then you can figure out what KPIs you need to track to make sure that you're accomplishing those goals. So when we're measuring specifically brand awareness, with the focus being visibility, you want to measure reach and impressions. So that shows you how many people are seeing your content. And you can also track mentions. A lot of times you need an external tool to track how many people are mentioning your brand. So again, we use Sprinkler. You can do this through Sprout, through Hootsuite. There's a variety of tools, but it is really helpful to be able to pull in information. What your prospects and partners and customers are saying about your brand is really valuable. But if you're looking to measure reputation or the impact that you're making with the content you're sharing, you definitely want to measure engagement and engagement rate, and then sentiment, which again, you might need an external tool to measure sentiment, but it's really important to understand we're building awareness, but we also really need to be building trust as a brand, because when someone thinks of your company, they want to know that they can trust you. And a lot of times social does tie into that. If you're available online, if you're consistently posting, they know they can reach you there too. So they feel they have a team behind them. They know that you're the one with the knowledge, you have the thought leadership that you're sharing. But if that's not the experience they're having, you want to understand what sentiment they are having so you can adapt your strategy. So it's important to keep track of this data, but keeping track of it is not enough. You need to go back and reflect and say, okay, if this was not exactly where I think it should be, how can we change that? Or if we don't have any engagement on our content, this may not be what people want to see. Or maybe you're not using the right hashtags to get it in front of the people that you want to see your content. So there's a few ways to remediate that, but you definitely need to keep track of minimally impressions, reach, and engagement, and then consistently reflect on them and adapt your strategy.
That's great guidance, Jess, on the data and the KPIs. So whatever strategy that a company puts in place or an MSP puts in place, it's not going to be perfect, but you can at least start with a hypothesis and approach that makes sense based on other best practices out there. But the value is in the data that you get, those reach or the impressions and engagement and sentiment. And then you can, as you said, use that information to inform and improve your strategy over time based on what's working. We have a question from the listeners. So, Jess, when should someone move to a LinkedIn Pro account? Is it needed for someone who isn't a power networker?
I don't think it's ever necessary. I do like LinkedIn Premium because, as we know, LinkedIn tells us and every person whose profile we ever look at that we're looking at it. And so sometimes you don't want that to be as publicized. So I do think LinkedIn Premium is good, especially if you're poking around and digging into who you might want to connect with. It is ideal for sales colleagues because Premium comes with some in-mail options, so you can send messages to people who you're not connected with. So it really depends on individual need. It's not a super expensive tool, but it's also not incredibly cheap. So you do need to consider that when you're deciding if you should have a premium account or not.
Yeah, and I can't remember exactly, but when I was using it, I believe it was, you start at about 1,000, then you go to 1,500, then you go to 2,000. And I think for most people, you can do that 1,000 a year. The 1,500 one is cool because it can integrate into your CRM if you have a CRM, and you can load lists into it so that you can enrich those lists. So you might have some target accounts in your CRM, but then when you load it into LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you can see which ones are, which contacts are active, or if there's growth in their companies and that sort of thing, which can be really valuable. Well, as usual, time has flown by, and Jess, we really appreciate what you do for us at ConnectWise and how you and the team have grown our presence on social. But I think this has been some great guidance for MSPs that are dipping their toes into social or want to improve what they're already doing, talking about how to build that personal brand, content strategy and the 80-20 rule, figuring out your overall strategy and goals, but then, of course, making sure you have the data to see if it's working and to refine and improve over time. Anything else you want to leave the audience with? Any last takeaways?
Yeah, I do. And I think it ties into one of the last things you said, which was you don't need to be perfect. So I know it's sort of challenging when you start to look at building a strategy. It can be overwhelming, but we do not need to be perfectionists on social. The concept of building community is that you're building community as the person that you are. And that might mean grammatical mistakes in your writing. It might mean your strategy is not perfect. That makes you human. So I do encourage you all to not spend too much time critiquing yourself and instead focus on what can I add, because you're the only person who's going to notice any of the little quirks or mistakes that you're making. So just be you, get out there, engage with people. And I, as a former educator, I thrive on helping other people and teaching new things. So if anyone wants to do a brainstorm or just get together to chat through some ideas or what your strategy could look like, connect with me on LinkedIn. Let's get in touch. I would be more than happy to have a conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jess. And Maddie, any last takeaways for the audience or observations?
I think the only other thing that I wanted to say is we have an amazing guide on likes to leads that I think would be amazing for anyone who wants to dive a little bit deeper into social media. Obviously 20 minutes isn't enough time to go over all of that. So we'll make sure that we drop that in the chat as well, just so anyone who's curious can continue to learn more.
Well, thanks again so much, Jess. And everyone who attended, we look forward to seeing you on the next Marketing Insights for MSPs with Maddie and myself. But thanks so much for joining.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everyone.